You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
On February 8, 40 out of 49 Starlink satellites launched by Elon Musk's SpaceX for his space-based communication system failed to reach their orbital paths and crashed back to Earth in a fiery display. SpaceX quickly put out a statement that a geomagnetic storm was the culprit, even though the storm hitting the Earth during the satellite's deployment was relatively weak. According to a representative of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, however, the satellites were shot down by a deep state faction still active in Europe. It has been 2 months since I last shared information from Thorhan Eredyan as relayed through Elena Danaan, so it is worth repeating why I consider his information reliable and worth considering. First, Elena was a former professional archaeologist who worked both in Egypt and France for 20 years. Elena gave up a respected professional career to work on esoteric and extraterrestrial related topics which carry little prestige among her former peers. A pure motivation and integrity are vital elements for reliable information, and Elena displays these in abundance in her communications with Thorhan. Second, there have been multiple sources that have come forward who have independently confirmed key aspects of Elena's information, many of whom I have interviewed about a variety of topics she first discussed. In particular, Alex Collier, James Gilliland, and my US Army source JP all confirm key aspects of Thorhan and Elena's testimony about a large fleet of spacecraft comprising highly evolved extraterrestrials that recently entered our solar system. In addition, Elena's information about an Ashtar command facility on Jupiter used for galactic diplomacy was independently corroborated by a remote viewing team from the Farsight Institute. Finally, I have worked closely with Elena in vetting and corroborating her information using open-source scientific literature. Elena is not merely content to put out unsubstantiated stories, but vetting and confirming all the information she receives and relays out to the public. An excellent example is that Elena just let me know about a February 10 scientific announcement confirming that a third planet was discovered around Proxima Centauri, a red dwarf star. In her book, A Gift from the Stars, she had stated that there were 3 inhabited planets orbiting Proxima Centauri, 4 around Alpha Centauri and 6 around Beta Centauri, which she illustrated in a diagram. This kind of scientific corroboration is an important reason why I enjoy working with Elena and believe her information from her Galactic Federation sources is reliable and well worth considering to get the big picture of what is happening on Earth, our solar system, and beyond. On February 10, I asked Elena about the failed Starlink satellites. Quote, "Did you notice that 40 of Elon Musk's Starlink satellites were knocked down due to solar activity, even though it's quite weak at the moment? Perhaps Thorhan can enlighten us on what really happened." End quote. Later that day, Elena sent me Thorhan's reply. "Elena, now what about these 40 satellites knocked out by a solar emission?" Thorhan, "I'm allowed to tell you that the attack was shot from the ground, not from space. Some of the secret organizations on this planet have a military program and hybrid weapons." Elena, "What are hybrid weapons?" Thorhan, "Back-engineered technology from the enemy, including non-Terran parts. This wasn't shot from the USA, but from the European continent. There is a powerful dark cult that owns this type of equipment." Elena, "So all bad ETs have gone from Earth, but still there are some negative human organizations up and running." Thorhan, "Yes, we are doing our best to assist you in taking them down." End quote. It's worth pointing out that Ben Davidson from Space Weather News did an analysis of the geomagnetic storm that impacted the SpaceX satellites. He pointed out how weak these were in comparison to severe space weather that can be as much as 1,000 times more powerful. Most importantly, he affirmed that SpaceX satellites have survived geomagnetic conditions 10 times as disruptive as the one that allegedly took out the satellites. To explain the puzzling failure of the satellites, Davidson concludes that the real culprit for their demise is the Earth's weakening geomagnetic field, effectively taking away Earth's protective shield from disruptive space weather. It's hard to imagine that a weakening geomagnetic field suddenly makes SpaceX satellites vulnerable to space weather 10 times weaker to what has been previously endured. The more likely scenario is that the weak space weather in the path of the satellites was temporarily augmented in a disguised attack, as claimed by Thorhan. It's likely that the place in Europe that was used in the attack on Musk's satellites is in northern Italy. This has long been rumoured to be a stronghold for the black nobility and was the birthplace of Italian fascism in the 1920s. Occult researchers such as Fritz Springmeier have discussed in books such as Bloodlines of the Illuminati the long history and power of the black nobility that dates back to medieval Europe. I further speculate that the hybrid weapon system and military program used in the attack was very likely associated with the same aerospace defense contractor allegedly involved in hijacking the 2020 US federal elections in what was widely dubbed Italygate, and led to furious debunking efforts by mainstream media sources such as Reuters. Leonardo Spa is an Italian satellite company that gets defense contracts from military organizations worldwide in building advanced aerospace technologies. Thorhan's information suggests that the weak geomagnetic storm that impacted the Starlink satellites was, in fact, a cover for a directed energy weapon that was used to increase the storm's severity in the vicinity of the Starlink satellites. This is the same method in which natural hurricanes are exacerbated and redirected by weather modification technologies, which were acknowledged to exist in 1997 by William Cohen, the Secretary of Defense, during the Bill Clinton administration. This would explain why SpaceX engineers and scientists believed the geomagnetic storm was responsible for the Starlink satellite's demise, since the deep state's weather modification technologies are not widely known. Thorhan went on to describe Elon Musk's role and why his satellites are now being targeted by a deep state faction. Thorhan, listen, this will be difficult for some people to hear. Elon Musk is protected by us. As long as he will respect the agreements of good conduct, he was granted assistance in developing more advanced technologies for the good future of this planet. The Terrans working for service to self are trying all they can to stop him. End quote. I first discussed Musk's involvement with the Galactic Federation of Worlds back in July 2021, when it was claimed he attended the diplomatic meetings held high in Jupiter's atmosphere at the Ashtar Command facility there. Musk's entrepreneurial endeavours have had a powerful effect in advancing the electric car industry, rocket industry, and now satellite communications industry. It is very plausible that Musk is being helped by the Galactic Federation to release more advanced technologies, many of which have been suppressed for decades. Currently, there are almost 6,000 patent applications that have been suppressed by secrecy orders imposed by the intelligence and defense communities through the US Patents and Trademarks Office. In earlier articles, I have discussed how an Earth Alliance is being helped to build advanced technologies on the Moon for eventual public release. This raises the critical question: is Starlink going to become an important tool for helping free humanity, or will it be used to control us with even more sophisticated technologies? A crucial point to keep in mind in finding an answer is that the current global communication system is controlled by deep state assets that own the mainstream media and big tech social media companies. These companies have been used to censor free speech all over the world, inflame public passions through contrived social and medical crises, and stifle the great awakening taking place on our planet. Musk's Starlink would break the deep state's monopoly control over global communications, which explains why his Starlink satellites are now being targeted. While credible independent sources such as Ben Davidson find it plausible that Musk's Starlink satellites were knocked down by a weak geomagnetic storm, I don't buy it. Given the deep state's access to weather modification and other hybrid technologies that can exacerbate atmospheric and solar storms with great accuracy, I find Thorhan's explanation far more plausible and worth investigating further. This has been Dr. Michael Salla with Exopolitics Today. I wish to thank Elena Danaan for forwarding Thorhan Eredyan's information and for permission to use her diagram of planets in the Centauri star systems. Special note, on February 26, I will present my first webinar of the year on what's coming in 2022 and beyond. Join me as I dive deep into the exopolitics paradigm shift that we are about to witness all over the planet as humanity awakens.